Is this the last inactive phase of the MJO for our current La Nina? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, December 21st.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people. All the time, no hype.
If you enjoy the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. And if you'd like to help support the cause, you can make a contribution below. Hit the super thanks button, the heart with the $ in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. B. Nadine, Tim Caston, Evolution Moto, Coach Nate, and our big contributor for the week, Don Mendatron. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And Merry Christmas to everyone, too. With that, let's get to work. We'll start by taking a look at significant wave heights around the planet. So it's starting in the North Pacific. Not a whole lot going on. A little bit of low pressure here producing 18-foot seas pushing south towards California. Some like wind swell will result from that. A little bit of some kind of a gale trying to organize here over the dateline, but not really doing anything yet. And that's about it. South Pacific, pretty quiet indeed. North Atlantic has been the star. Large swell developed last week, pushed into Ireland and Scotland. But at the moment, 27-foot seas just south of Greenland, and some other swell currently hitting Portugal into the Bay of Biscay, and of course Ireland. Seas in the 18-foot range at the peak. South Atlantic, things very quiet indeed. And then in the Indian Ocean, a gale with 27.6-foot seas right there, where the little plus sign is, and these are the highest seas over this entire domain. For the entire planet, right there, that's where it's happening, believe it or not. Another area of 25-foot seas south of Australia. All in all, a reasonably quiet pattern for this time of year. Maybe good for Christmas shopping, but certainly not great for surfing. All right, let's dig a little deeper. But before we get into the forecast, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to start by looking at the buoys up in the Pacific Northwest. Buoy number 036, Grays Harbor Buoy, right there on the border between Oregon and Washington. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy all the way up from 33.3 second period. Very energetic swell, which there is none, 0.0 feet. The whole way down to 5 second period, just pure, pretty much unrideable wind swell. You got a little bit there, but you see most energy somewhere in the 9 to 10 second range, 2.2, 2.4 feet of energy there, peak energy. Use an algorithm to sort of parse through all that. Primary swell, 4.5 feet at 10 seconds from 278 degrees, making surf at 4.5 feet. I think it's actually a little bit bigger than that. And then secondary swell, about the same size, 4.7 feet at 6.6 seconds. Notice the difference in period gets you from 4.5 feet to only 3.5 feet in rideable surf, and that from a little bit more of a southwesterly direction. Next, we head to San Francisco. San Francisco Buoy, 46026, inside the Farallon swell shadow there. A similar but not particularly inspiring pattern here. A steady bit of energy from 5 seconds the whole way up to about 12 seconds, and then trailing off from there. The algorithm suggests primary swell 3.8 feet at 10.7 seconds from 314 degrees, making surf at 4 feet. It's probably a little bit of an overstatement. And secondary swell 4.5 feet at 6 seconds from 245 degrees, making surf at 2.5 feet. And yeah, it's pretty much just like a south wind jumbled mess at anywhere that is exposed to south winds. Down to Southern California, the Point Loma South Buoy, buoy number 191 there off of San Diego. The same profile, only far less energy, attenuated by the Channel Islands. Nothing even getting to 1 foot in any particular frequency band, but you sort of add everything together. Primary swell 1.2 feet, 14.1 seconds from 266 degrees, making surf at about 1.5 feet. Yeah, there were waist-high waves at some spots, and then the secondary swell 1.6 feet at 9.4 seconds, again 1.5 foot, and pretty much inconsequential. over to the north shore of Hawaii, Oahu specifically, Waimea Bay buoy number 106. We do have swell. You see it here, a little bit of spike somewhere between 11.8 to 12.5 seconds, and then some wind swell off on the down the lower end of that. Primary swell 5.9 feet at 11.9 seconds. Making surf at 7 feet from 307 degrees. And that's pretty much what it is. A couple feet overhead this morning, clean, looked rideable at select spots. Certainly better than over on the west coast. Primary swell, and then the secondary swell, 3.5 feet at 8.7 seconds from 282 degrees. So some 3 foot, I'll call it wind swell in the mix. So what has been going on over the past week? A quick look, the weekend review for the North Pacific starting Sunday, the 14th of December. A little bit of a gale here in the northern Gulf of Alaska, produced 22-foot seas aimed south at the Hawaiian Islands, and then mixed fragments of other energy-producing 18, 19-foot seas that were aimed at the U.S. West Coast. That created wind swell. You can see it pushing into California. And then this steady background energy that started pushing into Hawaii. Another gale developed north of the Hawaiian Islands, kind of aimed more off to the southwest, but as the low moved north of the Hawaiian Islands, it pushed into the Hawaiian swell window. Swell started hitting. We're on Thursday, the 18th of December. And as of today, you see remnants of that gale still were in place as of Saturday. Swell is still hitting the Hawaiian Islands as we speak. And then we got to current time, but that is about petering out. One more day on Monday, and then we'll be looking for some other swell source. Notice a new little gale trying to develop in the northern Gulf. I wouldn't even call it a gale. I'll call it low pressure because I don't think winds are even 35 knots. Looking at the southern hemi for the past week, starting on Sunday, December 14th, there was a gale south of Tasmania with 30-foot seas, 30.2-foot seas over 1 Grib square there. Another little system produced 22 or 23-foot seas, but relative to Hawaii and California, no significant swell is expected to result from that. We're looking for anything else with, like, say, 28-foot seas over the past week, and we don't see that. No big surprise. It is pretty much officially today, I think, the start of winter. To the North Pacific, and anyone that has been following social media knows that things kind of lit up for the North Atlantic over the past week. Starting here on Tuesday, the 16th of December, a gale built with 47-foot seas, building to 54 feet at 18Z on Tuesday, and then down to 50 feet in the evening, continuing 49 feet, and into Wednesday, still 48 feet. You can see the swell hitting Ireland right there and up into northern Scotland, and then continued producing some sort of seas, even into almost early Friday. Large swell hit, the typical spots you'd expect. And it was pretty solid indeed. Well lined up. The boys were on it. It looked pretty impressive. And then we got into Friday and Saturday. Another gale developed, like 32, 33-foot seas, targeting the same areas. That faded out. And here we are, current time. A quieter pattern is in play. Over the past week for the South Atlantic, starting on Sunday, December 14th, we're looking for anything that happened that produced, I'll say, 25-foot seas or better. There we go, a little area, 30-foot seas developed Thursday evening, the 18th of December, pushed south to South Africa. You can see sideband swell pushed into top spots down on the south end there, and then worked their way up the coast. Current time, now, nothing else going on. And then finally, the Indian Ocean weekend review. A little tropical system south of, I'll call it, the Mentawai Islands. Looking for anything else, though. Pretty quiet. We're into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Little gale here, 33-foot seas on Saturday, the 20th of December. They kind of faded out. Still, you see some swell front and the other system that pushed under South Africa, producing swell that is likely radiating off to the north. We have, 2 more frames here. You see it pushing towards Western Australia and some energy up into Bali and the Mentawai Islands. So what is to come? What is the forecast? We're going to start by looking at the Jetstream. This is an image of Jetstream level winds. These are winds up about 30,000 feet. These winds help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push in the jet to the south. You see sort of a trough here, sort of a trough here. What that does, we'll use this one as an example because it helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft, and that also can manifest itself down at the ocean surface. Counterclockwise flow of air in the northern hemisphere is the hallmark of low pressure. Of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds impart energy to the ocean, getting traction on it, creating seas. As those seas radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period, the less energetic portions of that raw sea state decay away, exposing longer period swell. And of course, swell when it hits your beach, like in California or Hawaii there, you get surf. Now, the big feature here is the jet is pushing off Japan. You see it just split heavily, okay? Meaning the jet stream is, for whatever reason, very weak. The jet in this split pattern, typically between the split, you get high pressure right there, which would be a clockwise circulation. So the northern branch of the jet tracking up through the Bering Sea, falling south through the Gulf of Alaska, and then pushing into the U.S. West Coast, creating a little trough here that's supporting low pressure. We saw that generating some weak seas in this area here, but nothing impressive. Now, this would basically be a cutoff, not a proper trough, because the main flow of energy is split 50-50 between these two branches of the jet. But do notice the two branches consolidate right off the California coast and then push inland. When you get this split pattern, and I know we're going to sort of jump ahead here a little bit, but this is a classic sign of the inactive phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. And when I talk about it later, it affects global weather, the MJO does, and it really affects the area of the ocean where it is. The MJO is like down on the equator. When you see this split pattern, typically that means the inactive phase of the MJO, it travels west to east on the equator here, is down here somewhere. And what it is doing is creating falling dry air, high pressure that steals energy from the jet stream. The jet stream gets weak and splits just like this. You notice this pattern started about a week ago, right about as the inactive phase of the MJO set up. The good news is it doesn't look like it's going to last too long. So this is a temporary period. Great for your Christmas shopping, not so great for surfing. But the other good thing this split MJO or the split jet stream does do is because the northern branch tracks north over the Bering Sea, it has to fall south eventually. And what that does is set up backdoor troughs that push down the U.S. West Coast. And with those comes precipitation and moisture. We hadn't had anything that resembled rain over California for 6 weeks or something like that. Finally, we're getting some rain here in Northern California, and the forecast is for rain working itself the whole way down into Southern California. So much needed precip is in the forecast, and at some point there is going to be copious snow. I think there is snow up, well, you see where the jet stream is here? North of the jet stream, there's snow. South of here, it's warm and it's rain, but that jet is supposed to be falling south. In fact, let's put this into motion. Here we go. We're into Monday, Tuesday. Now, you'll see little variations and stuff here. In fact, let me go back just one day here. On Monday, the split continues. Yeah, it's a bit more fragmented. Some sort of low pressure will probably generate here. But notice this big trough forecast setting up off the California coast. There you go. We're into Tuesday night and then Wednesday. That is a clear trough there. Normally the back door variety, the trough is like literally right over the U.S. West Coast. This is off the coast a little bit, so it's going to drag a whole bunch of moisture, warm, moist air from down here up over the coast, and then cold air coming down as the jet moves over the U.S. West Coast. So, of course, that means snow for the mountains, rain for the lower lands. This continues into Thursday and Friday, and of course, in that trough, you'll get some sort of like literal winds and some hope for swell production. Nothing huge, but rideable. You see the trough pushing inland into Saturday and Sunday, we'll just take this the whole way out. I'll take it the whole way to the end because still you see the jet split, kind of trying to figure out what it's doing, but still pretty much a split mess, energy being stolen from it, and just nothing other than rain and snow. Take what you can get and be thankful for it. Now let's go down to the surface. It takes winds blowing on the ocean surface to produce raw seas and therefore swell. You see here a little weak, convoluted low pressure system. Remember the jet coming off Japan, splitting up that way. I mean, literally the winds are following, then building a little trough here. There's another trough here. So we have, I'll call it a gale, 30 knot, 35 knot winds, and a gale up here, 30, 35 knot winds. But it's the weakest kind of not inspiring gale in either case. Anyway, we're into Monday. Still low pressure there. Now this gale here on the dateline gets better evolved, but notice 35 to 40 knot winds, but they're all aimed off to the west toward Japan. Hawaii here, there's a little fragment down here. We'll go back a day. No, it's right about there. This little fetch of 20 to 25 knot winds targeting the island, sort of. But, you know, it's really kind of a grasp as to whether any swell will result for Hawaii. So we get into this, we're into, here we go, Tuesday. A new low pressure system starts falling with the jet off the U.S. West Coast. You actually see the red line, low pressure, fetch pushing up into California. In fact, let's go back just a day. There you go. Tuesday, the low just starts getting organized. This will be the first push of precip into California, the whole way down to at least Point Conception. Get into Wednesday, that continues. Bigger low builds off the coast. This broad, ill-formed low continues with 30 knot winds, sort of aimed at Hawaii, but a long ways away. This really is the main feature. You get into Christmas Eve night, fully starts winding up off the coast. There you go, 30, 35 knot winds pushing in for pretty much from Morro Bay the whole way up the state. And then eventually that, I think, is going to drag some energy into Southern California. Even on Thursday into Friday, it continues circulating. Another low starts building here over. The core low is down here, but the main fetch is going to be up to the north. We'll get this into Friday. Finally, the low off California fades. We get a broad fetch of 35, 40, almost 45 knot winds. They're kind of more northeast. So Hawaii is down here, not really aimed at Hawaii initially. And then we get into Saturday and Sunday. I'm not really sure given the wind direction here, which is basically like that. Hawaii's down here. I'd say sideband energy for Hawaii, especially there. It gets a little bit better aimed at it, but I don't think it's going to be as much swell as if you just look at the wave models and go, oh yeah, I just don't think it's going to happen. But then you get to the final frame of the model, 180 hours out. Don't believe any of this. You got 35 knot winds aimed directly at Hawaii, but from a pretty good long ways away. So what effect will those winds have on the ocean surface? Current state, 18Z Sunday, that's the 10 a.m. run of the model, but it takes about 5 hours for the model to actually like hit the servers so that, sites like Stormsurf can get it and it can start rendering images. So there's a bit of a lag there. Anyways, I'll call that 16 or 17 foot seas in the Gulf of Alaska. 20.3 foot seas right there, somewhere around the dateline area. Let's put this into motion, see what's coming. First gale produces 18, 19 foot seas, maybe, nope, not even 20 foot seas pushing towards California. That's good for like 12-second period wind swell. Again, the swell vectors here, all aimed away from Hawaii. Yes, there's 26, 20, 27, almost 28 foot seas, but these are all aimed north. So we're into Tuesday. Next gale starts organizing. Now, here you go. There's 20, 22, 24 foot seas, just barely aimed at Hawaii and a pretty long ways away. I don't know how much is really going to come from that. First gale off California sort of winds up, gets you 20 foot seas, reorganizes, produces another 22 foot seas, aimed better at North and Central California. Actually, look at this right here. There is west winds, 18 foot seas. So maybe some swell for Hawaii from that. Anyway, we're into Thursday, the Christmas Day. 26 foot seas falling south. Need some energy actually pushing to the coast. You see swell energy pretty much from San Francisco down into Point Conception. I don't know how much of this is going to wrap into Southern California, but there is some hope there. Next gale organizes, again, mainly northeast fetch, 30-foot seas. They are falling south. That's better for getting some momentum going this way. So I'll say sideband swell energy possible for Hawaii. Oops, and there we are. We're a week out. So the swell hasn't reached Hawaii, and we'll just have to see how all this plays out. But there is some hope. Given the inactive phase of the MJO and how split the Jetstream is, pretty much anything you get would be a miracle. Take it and make the most of it. Southern Hemi, South Pacific, we'll put this into motion. The expectation is zero activity. We're into Thursday, Friday, Saturday, a week out now, Sunday, and literally nothing of any interest. The North Atlantic, 27-foot seas south of Greenland. Let's see if anything really evolves from that. Not really. 20-foot seas, persistent area of stormy weather, but just nothing anywhere close to like what has just happened. Energy pushing mainly up into Greenland and Iceland, not so much targeting the UK or Europe for that matter. Another low, the pattern, pushing off of, I'll call it East Canada, and then pushing off to the northeast. I mean, that's kind of been the pattern since even the fall. That pattern still looks entrenched. Here's another one. We're into Sunday, a week out. Same sort of deal. So activity, not so much for the U.S. East Coast, mainly for Europe, and more of a glancing blow for this coming week. To the South Atlantic. The expectations would be very low for the Southern Hemi this time of year. There we go. We got 22-foot seas, but a long ways away from South Africa. And they kind of plod their way across the South Atlantic into Sunday. And where are we? 180 hours out. Okay, never believe a model even a week out. About 5 days is as far as I'd go. So not a whole lot forecast. Maybe some hope a week out. And then finally, to the Indian Ocean. A little bit of a gale passing south of Australia, 22-foot seas, something else in the mid-Indian Ocean, not really doing a whole lot. Same gale pushing south of Tasmania with 25-foot seas, trying to support some sort of raw swell there. Looking further out, tropical activity forecast. It is summer in the Southern Hemi, and we're out a week. Not a whole lot happening. So even the Indian Ocean going pretty quiet. The local wind forecast for California and Hawaii. Hawaii down here. California right here. There's the Baja, Southern California border. Southern California Point Conception. Right there, Monterey Bay. Over here, San Francisco, and up into Cape Mendocino. The low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, a front associated with it dragging moisture down to about California, but this is wind forecast. So south winds for Monterey Bay northward, not too strong, 15 knots, but not making for great surf or anything. Trades very light, 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands today. We get into Monday, low pressures organizes weekly in the Gulf of Alaska, a light wind regime for California, mix of south and maybe north winds, but 5 or 10 knots at best. Big old high pressure here, cut off low north of Hawaii, but trades, Hawaii spared for most of it, trades 15 knots. Tuesday, trades build 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Low pressure starts building along California, so watch right there, 30 knots south winds. This would be Tuesday afternoon from Point Conception well up into, I'll say Point Arena, something like that. We get into Wednesday morning. Next low pressure starts heading up. South winds continue. Not too bad, 10, 15 knots. Trades east-southeast, 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, Christmas morning. Big south wind event, southwest, and not a strong one, but just steady 25-knot south winds from Point Conception the whole way up into Northern California. Trades light for the Hawaiian Islands. Friday, same sort of deal, just a persistent stormy local pattern for California, but nothing over the top. I mean, no like big gale or anything like that. Trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Get into Saturday, still now a much lighter regime, finally for California by Saturday, the 27th of December. Trades southeast 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Get to Sunday, what do we have? A little bit of northwest winds, but I think near shore, maybe 10 knots out of the north, or maybe something like that. Trades southeast 10 to 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands, and there we are. We're a week out, and you know, nothing too bad, nothing too horrendous for the Christmas weekend other than rain for California. So let's pull on the rain thread a little bit relative to California, Southern California, Central California, the Bay Area right there. So just north of San Francisco. I mean, today it's like spitting little drops of rain in San Francisco, but not really a wholesale rain event. It looks like all the rain is north, let's say Point Arena, something like that. Put this into motion. As we get into Monday, the rain falls south, snow in the higher elevations, laser focused on Lake Tahoe. Rain continues through the day Monday, then lifts north. Things drying out for Tahoe, but wet along the coast. I mean, some for Central California, but I'd say most of this looks like Santa Cruz and northward. No snow on Tuesday for Lake Tahoe, but then you get into Wednesday morning, the storm winding up off the coast, and boom, rain the whole way down to Southern California, down to San Diego, solid along the coast, snow in all the upper elevations from, you know, Southern Sierra the whole way up, much needed for the Sierra, and all the ski resorts will take it. That snow continues really solid for the Sierra in through the day, Wednesday into Wednesday night. More rain for Southern California as we get into, and all of California, and we get into Thursday. The snow event pulses again, strong snow for the entire Sierra, continuing through Thursday, even into Friday. Rain still, now showers more for San Diego Friday, but look at the snow pulsing yet again Friday night into Saturday, and finally the low kind of loses its energy. Things start drying out other than maybe Southern California. We're into a week out from now, Sunday the 28th of December, and still lingering showers for Southern California, but nothing too particularly bad, and bits of snow here and there. In fact, let's go back. Yep, it's just sort of like a backdoor little local system over the Southern Sierra, finally topping off the snowpack for the Southern Sierra. The snow forecast dashboard for Palisades, Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley, Olympic Valley, off the charts. Let's click and see what we have down there. Total accumulations, 128 inches. Now, this chart is anchored on the very peak summit. Lower elevations, we have to go look at the snow profile or the freeze level profile chart here, okay? This black line is the base of Palisades, Tahoe. This is the summit, the top of the Palisades here. Red, if there's precipitation, would be liquid precipitation. Gray would be sleet. The freeze line, 32 degrees, right where the gray and the white meet. So today, the freeze line, let's see, the 21st of December at about 8,500 feet, and that's about what it looked like. It really looks like it's raining definitely at 8,000 feet. There was snow on the deck up there, and it all got washed out about midday today. I'm not sure what's happening up at the very top, whether it is freezing or not. Anyway, you see the snow, the 8,500 foot level holding about into the morning of Christmas Eve, and then it starts falling. And the day before Christmas Eve, and then as you get into the 24th Christmas Eve, for the most part, snowing the whole way down to the valley floor. Yeah, some sleet mixed in. It'll probably be wet snow, but up top's really what matters. That continues, and then it just gets colder into the 27th and 28th. But then you can see these dates here. They're pretty well matched up, these two charts. You see all the precipitation. Really, it starts, and where the yellow lines are, starts here and continues the whole way through here. So theoretically, decent snow levels. That'd be good for building snowpack from the bottom the whole way to the top. But of course, the top will see the most of it. Then things warm up, but it also dries up. The blue is new accumulation. There is none. So it's a 1, 2, 3-day event. Will there be 120 inches? No, I doubt it. But, you know, theoretically, if all the stars align, you could get that. Let's go look at one more resort. Mammoth Mountain, the same sort of profile. Here we go. Let's go see what the total accumulation is. 117 inches. Okay, not so bad. And let's see. Now, the good news is, well, there's all your snow. The 24th, the 25th, the 26th into, yeah, the 26th, 0Z, the 27th. That's still the night of the 26th. Now, Mammoth being much higher. Here's the base at 8,000 feet, the summit up at 11,000 feet. All the snow, freeze levels below the base, well below the base for the entire event. So, and there's even little bits of dribbles of another inch or two here and there on the 27th out to the 29th. Yeah, you see high freeze level for that last level, but the rest of it pretty good. Mammoth, well set up to get a healthy dump of snow. All right, let's quickly blast through a couple of select locations. Surf spot forecast. Columbia River there, Oregon, Washington border. 10-foot surf on Tuesday, probably pretty raw. It doesn't show any wind, but I can't believe it's going to be particularly clean. Fading out as we get into Wednesday, Thursday. Another little pulse of surf in the 6 to 7 foot range on Friday, and that's slowly fading out the whole way through the weekend. Winds offshore during that for a good portion of this, actually. Let's go look at swell heights. 8 feet at 9 seconds. There you go. 8 feet, 11 seconds. So pure wind swell. The next little pulse, 7 feet at 11 seconds. So nothing too particularly impressive. Ocean Beach, San Francisco. Surf 4 foot on Monday, 3.5 feet Tuesday, in the 6 to 7 foot range. Tuesday into Wednesday, we look at south winds, 35, 40 knots kind of thing. So you know what it's going to be, just a windy, blown out mess. Dropping off, but then as we get into Thursday and Friday, surf heights in the 5 to 6 foot range with light winds and probably pretty, improving conditions. Monday, 4 feet at 8 seconds, 5 feet at 11 seconds, 5 feet, 11 seconds. We get into the weekend, 6 feet at 9 seconds, 5 feet at 11 seconds sort of thing. So rideable surf, nothing too challenging. Maybe that's a good thing. Down to Southern California. Dana Point, just representative of anything 1 foot or less. Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday, it comes up 1.5 feet. Thursday, 1.5 feet, pushing 2 feet, peaking at about 2.5 feet on Friday and Saturday, dropping down from there. Look at south winds, 25 knots for Southern California. You don't see that very often. Swell heights, pretty much non-existent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then in the 2.5 foot range, 7 seconds, 2.5 foot range at 10 to 11 seconds. So some rideable surf in the latter part of the Christmas weekend. North shore of Oahu, surf heights today in the 5.5 foot range. It's actually bigger than that. We saw that. Dropping off those, we get in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Another little pulse of swell on Thursday, Friday in the 6 to 7 foot range, slowly dribbling down from 6 feet on later Friday, maybe another little bit of energy on Sunday. Notice winds like really calm, really light for the Hawaiian Islands as we get into next weekend. Swell sizes, 5 feet at 11 seconds, dropping off to 3 feet at 9, pretty much non-existent. Then as we get Thursday, Friday, 5.5 feet at 12 seconds, 5 feet at 11 seconds. Another little pulse, 4 feet at 13 seconds on Sunday. Quick look just somewhere else, Jefferies Bay. I don't know why I'm looking there. Maybe I should be looking more up in Europe. We'll do this anyway. 4 foot, 3 foot, 5 foot, 4 foot, basically 4 foot surf. Winds, some version of it looks like almost onshore the entire time. Swell heights, 3 feet at 11, 3 feet at 9, 4 feet at 10 seconds. So nothing too impressive. Then over to Bali, 3 foot surf to 4 foot, maybe 9 foot on Thursday. Trickling down another little pulse in the 6 foot range as we get into Sunday. Swell height, 6 feet at 15 seconds. There we go, some real swell. 5 feet at 12 to 13 seconds. 4 feet at 15 seconds. 4 feet at 10 seconds. Looks like they're taking the cake. It's the middle of summer down there, and they're still better than the northern hemisphere, at least in the Pacific for the moment. All right, let's go take a look long term. We're going to look at the two major weather oscillations that affect our weather long term. As we spoke before, the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We'll start by talking about the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. Active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other. They rotate west to east around the planet on the equator. The active phase is our friend. It is like a low-pressure system. When it pushes across the equator in the Atlantic from west to east, takes warm, moist air down at the ocean's surface, lifts it aloft. That warm, moist air gets infused into the jet stream, making the jet stream stronger. It helps consolidate it, push it together, and you get one straight flow pushing across the Pacific, hopefully into the U.S. West Coast, making wind, snow, and rain, but also good for digging out troughs and making storms. Inactive phase, it takes like 4 to 6 weeks for the active phase to move from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. Then typically following that, you get the inactive phase, which is high pressure. You get falling dry air falling. That steals energy from the jet stream. The jet stream gets weaker, it splits, and you get exactly what you saw on the jet stream charts over the Pacific. No wonder the jet stream is split in the Pacific, and no wonder they had giant surf in the Atlantic, because the active phase of the MJO, last week, the active phase of the MJO likely last week was somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, fueling the jet stream there, generating, 54-foot seas. So all this fits together quite well. The real question is, how long is the inactive phase going to hang over the Pacific? Standard historical data tells us 4 to 6 weeks, and we're only maybe 2 weeks into the pattern right now, but I think we're going to do better than that. All right, before we get going, though, let's take a look at winds, trade winds over the Pacific, because the MJO affects trade winds. I mean, what I just spoke to you was a theory. Let's see if we can bear that out with some quantitative data. The active phase of the MJO being a low-pressure system, it dampens trade winds. Trade winds are generated by high pressure. The low pressure sort of tamps it down. Trade winds are weaker than normal. Inactive phase, because it's a high-pressure system, trade winds generated by high pressure, the two cycles sort of mash together, and you get stronger than normal trades. All right, so we're looking at trade wind data here from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator. Here's the East Pacific, West Pacific, New Guinea there, dateline there, 0 is the equator. We're just looking at the arrows. Trade wind strength, raw trade wind strength. Moderate over the East Pacific, stronger over the Central Pacific, real strong over the dateline and into the Kelvin wave generation area, the far West Pacific. But it is not the actual wind speeds that matter. It is the anomaly, difference from normal for this time of year. In the East Pacific, the arrows are pretty much non-existent, meaning trades are dead neutral. Trades building a little bit out of the east over the Central Pacific, then moderately stronger over the dateline into the Kelvin wave generation area. So this all supports the idea, inactive phase somewhere over here. Zonal wind anomalies for the past 5 days, going back to December 15th. South America, Central America, 0. That's the equator going the whole way across there. Where's Australia, New Guinea there? So the far West Pacific is what we're most interested in. When you have west anomalies here, they infuse energy to the jet stream. That gives the jet stream momentum, allowing it to consolidate and push across the Pacific. So we see sort of a moderate, and just on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So in the East Pacific, east anomalies. In the West Pacific, east anomalies. This is on the 15th. It's really here I'm looking. East anomalies building in coverage, suggesting in my mind some version of the inactive phase setting up in this area, where you see here in the Atlantic, west anomalies, west anomalies, west anomalies, west anomalies, suggesting the active phase here. The zonal wind anomaly forecast and past performance, all right? This is the whole planet. The blues, eastern anomalies, the yellows and oranges, westerly anomalies. So roughly active phase, inactive phase. The date, this is the whole planet though, so 180, the date line is right here. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so here. So you can see westerly anomalies were over the entire West Pacific for pretty much the entire whole past month. That was the active phase of the MJO. Now easterly anomalies building, expecting, so these are 5 days, going pretty solid for about the next week to maybe 10 days. Okay, so inactive phase setting up, and then here you go, west anomalies building. This is over Indonesia, but you see the east anomalies here at the last couple of days of the model run fading out, west anomalies start building again. So I would say this is inactive phase, with the active phase coming 10 days or so from now, which isn't that bad for an inactive phase. So yeah, we're suffering. We don't have surf at the moment, but maybe it's not going to be that bad of an event. Let's keep digging. We have another model here, the statistic model. This shows you not winds, but cloud cover. Active phase of the MJO takes warm moist air, lifts it aloft. That warm moist air condenses in the upper atmosphere as it gets colder, creates more clouds than normal. Inactive phase, falling dry air would mean high pressure, no clouds. All right, the blue is cloudier than normal skies, negative outgoing long wave radiation. The yellows and oranges, clear skies, inactive phase of the MJO. South America, Central America, New Guinea, equator right there, date line right there. So this shows weak active phase at the moment, December 20th, on the date line fading as the inactive phase builds 5 days from now, 10 days from now, 15 days from now, with the next active phase setting up in the Indian Ocean. The dynamic model paints a little bit different picture, basically saying the same thing, but saying the inactive phase not all that strong, and 2 weeks from now, pretty much fading away as the active phase tries to push into the West Pacific. Phase diagrams for the same two model runs. This would be the statistic model, the dynamic model here. How do you read the chart? The active phase, it's mapping where the active phase is. It moves from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic to Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is, so sure enough, in the Atlantic. The further the dot is outside of this circle, the stronger the active phase is. If it's in the circle, it's like considered extremely weak. So weak active phase per the statistic model, and moving 15 days from now into the roughly central Indian Ocean, somewhere between very weak and maybe moderate in strength. The dynamic model suggests the active phase trying to build over the Indian Ocean and then collapsing, but about the same thing, very weak over the Indian Ocean 2 weeks from now. Another model, the CFS model, dynamic model, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Again, the blues easterly anomalies, the reds westerly anomalies. MJO is depicted on this chart. Solid contour, dotted contour would be inactive phase. Notice the easterly anomalies, and the active phase with westerly anomalies going back in time. The date line running right up the middle of the chart, far West Pacific starting at 125 east, so right there. So you see we had inactive, and then this whole from October into pretty much somewhere late November, all one consolidative active phase. Now here's our inactive phase. According to this chart, not even 2 weeks from now, by about January 1st, the inactive phase starts fading. Westerly anomalies in the active phase start pushing into the West Pacific right about January 1st and holding after that. So again, what do we have, a week and a half or something like that before we start moving into a better pattern, theoretically? Let's go look at one more model. Here's the CFS model now going out 3 months. Forecast is up here, past performance is down here. Date line runs right up the middle. Yellows, reds, that'd be westerly anomalies, active phase, the blues, easterly anomalies. So you can see right here, active phase pushed through the Pacific, the West Pacific, October, and pretty much the whole month of November. Easterly anomalies now setting up. Inactive phase of the MJO. Each one of these tick marks is a week, so maybe 2 weeks. But even at a week from now, December 29th, you see westerly anomalies start trying to push into the West Pacific and then pretty much taking over as we get into the first week of January. Let's overlay the MJO here. All right, no big surprise. There's our dotted contour, inactive phase of the MJO. Now, from a rain perspective, this is good when the inactive phase is sort of more in the West Pacific. It makes that split jet stream flow over the dateline. But as the inactive phase moves closer to California at 120 west here, then that pushes the high pressure over California. The low pressure active phase starts moving into the West Pacific. So that would give us clear skies, light winds over California while the storm pattern starts building in the West Pacific, feeding the jet stream. And we go back through the cycle again. Active phase starting, I'd say January 1st. Now this one going the whole way into the middle of February. That is 6 weeks long. So pretty much a normal active phase cycle. And then this model has always been saying that a week in active phase with westerly anomalies. It said the same thing about this one. My guess is there'll be some sort of an inactive phase out here in March. The point being, is this the final inactive phase of our current La Nina? And I say that for a bunch of reasons. One, notice westerly anomalies forecast building over the entire Pacific. That was supposed to happen here. It's not quite there yet, but there is definitely momentum that suggests La Nina is fading. We'll get into that. Let's overlay the low pass filter. One more piece of data. Okay, the dotted contour, the La Nina high pressure bias over. Well, it's not even over the dateline anymore. It has moved east to 150, so basically south of Hawaii. The low pressure bias, this is your El Nino indicator, and you see the clear trend up here as we get into March. Lower pressure bias building over the Pacific. The high pressure bias, the La Nina signal, fading out completely. Unfortunately, we're well into winter by the time it happens, and it still takes like 2 or 3 months after all these things change for it really to, take hold in the atmosphere and become evident in California and over Hawaii. By then, winter will be long gone. Subsurface water temperature profile. If trades are blowing stronger than normal from east to west, the isotherms or the warm water gets shunted more to the West Pacific. If trades are weaker than normal or you have westerly anomalies, this warm water starts pushing off to the east. If trades are super depressed, that is super much stronger, weaker than normal, then you move into El Nino and a lot of warm water starts pushing east. We're not seeing that. We're looking at the 29 degrees Celsius isotherm. It was back at 172 last week. It's to about 173, almost 174, suggesting trades a little bit lighter here. 28 isotherm. 28 degree isotherm, pretty much the same thing, moved maybe 2 degrees to the east. But the 24 degree isotherm was back at 122 last week. It's at 132 this week. So kind of a mixed bag, but it is not the actual temperatures matters, is the anomalies. And the big story here is one, the difference from where the cold water is and the warm water. Notice there have been westerly anomalies persistently and encroaching further into the West Pacific. The warm water pool here, 3 degrees Celsius above normal, was back at 160 or 165. So like there, notice the difference pushing to the west. So that's, where's that 150? That's 150. So making it to 150. Also last week, the -2 degree bubble of warm water was the whole way over into here. It has retracted significantly. Now, I say that, but we know the inactive phase is moving into the West Pacific, so maybe this will kind of get another last hold, this last pulse of the inactive phase of the MJO. We'll have to see. Let's go look at more data. Here's the same data, but enhanced with satellite data. You can clearly see what looks like a Kelvin wave pushing across the Pacific. It is moving, too. One of our readers commented, well, is that a Kelvin wave? And I replied, not until you see it moving. But, we are getting some traction. I mean, leading edge of it now, 150 meters below the ocean surface. That's the real isotherm. It's now at like 135 west. It was back at 150 and 160 for months. And you see the same sort of profile with most of the cold water started pushing off to the east now. So I'm still not going to say this is a Kelvin wave, but if we see a bunch more momentum, and I'm not saying it is a Kelvin wave because the inactive phase is building and whatever progress it has been made could easily retract here in the next couple of weeks, but we'll have to keep our eyes on that. The satellite data also showing some encouraging signs. So this is Chile, Peru, Ecuador right there, the Galapagos Islands, Central America, equator there, dateline there, New Guinea there. This is the sphere of the ocean. Take the waves, wind waves, the tides. And this is the sphere of the ocean, higher or lower than normal. Why does that matter? If you have cold water at depth, cold water contracts, you'll get a little divot on the ocean surface. If you have warmer water at depth, it will expand, it will push the ocean's height up. So you see -5, this is -5 centimeters, -10 centimeters. So suggesting cold water at depth here, but notice it's only 5 centimeters and it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator that really matters. So in here, things have actually, the ocean has risen a bit in this area. We have -20 there, -15 there, but they're on the hairy edges of the main monitoring area. Also notice positive anomalies encroaching east. They were back at like -175 east. They're now at, well, I don't know what that is, 170 west, and notice pretty much neutral all the way to 150 west. The trend over time here, West Pacific, East Pacific here. This is upper ocean heat anomalies. You can see the beginning, this is July of 2025. Cold water, the blues, the reemergence of our La Nina, but compared to last year's Modoki La Nina, not even close. You see the warm water, active phases of the MJO pushing east, one there back in August. Another in September, October. Our current one here in December. Notice the cool water retreating to 125 west. Pretty good, probably as far as anything. And the thought is this could be the last one. But ultimately, it is what is happening on the ocean surface. Cooler waters, you can see them here streaming, not right off of Ecuador, but from the Galapagos off to about the dateline a little bit further. Pretty much unchanged, maybe, if anything, getting a little bit more in the depth of the blues, a little bit more intense than a couple of weeks ago, but still pretty much holding solid. Again, only 5 degrees south and north is the equator. That's what matters. So you see warm temperatures here in the west, colder in the east, the dividing line about the dateline. What's the trend been over the past 7 days? There is good news here, too. The reds warming temperatures from Ecuador to the Galapagos out to about 120 west, and then pretty much holding neutral there. So it's not getting any colder. It's getting a little bit warmer. This is a 7-day trend, though. It can change pretty quick. With the inactive phase building to the east, one would expect at some point this is going to cool off for a week or two. Sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.28 region. That's right there on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, from Ecuador out to the Galapagos and a little bit beyond. Temperatures there, 0.941, 941 thousandths of a degree below normal. You see we were a bit below that, but we've been hovering in that region about 1 degree below normal since October. But this is not the official El Nino monitoring region. This is here, the Nino 3.4 region, from a point on the equator south of California out to the dateline. Temperatures today, 1.184 degrees below normal. Neutral El Nino is +5 to -0.5, or +0.5, sorry, to -0.5. Weak La Nina, 0.5 to -1. This is not corrected data, so this is suggesting, I'll call it a weak to barely modest La Nina, and not getting any deeper. Sea surface temperature trend right here for the Nino 3.4 region. This is corrected data. Says that like -1 degree or 1.2 degrees we saw before. Really, when you take into effect global warming and a warming planet, it's really -0.7 degrees. So the previous chart was probably the worst case scenario. This is the best, this is the best case scenario. So still in the weak La Nina territory at the moment, and the expectation is temperatures probably are going to be coming up from here. The outgoing long wave radiation, cloud cover, current situation as of December 16th, and then the anomalies. The blues, more clouds than normal, suggesting sort of a El Nino-ish like condition. The oranges and reds drier than normal air. You see actually pretty neutral the whole way out to the dateline, then just east of the dateline drier than normal. And then we put that into historical perspective. Here's the dateline, the reds and the oranges, again, drier air, the blue, your El Nino signal. This is last year, January 2025. Very dry air over the dateline, wet air just hanging right at the entrance to the West Pacific. You notice barely even a dry air signal on the dateline according to this data, and with a broader wet air signal making it almost to the dateline, at least as of this moment. So given that, what does the atmosphere think is going on? We look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Darwin, roughly over the maritime continent. Tahiti, not over the West Pacific, but sort of like the central to almost East Pacific. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative. Well, today it's positive, 13.96, but it's only been that way for a day and a half, 2 days. Prior to that, negative, hovering around. There's a couple of positive readings, but then deeply negative back the early part of December. In fact, we were pretty much negative starting Thanksgiving and have been up to just about today, suggesting that the past, now this is sort of a delayed look, the past active phase of the MJO did a pretty good job. In fact, you can see the trend on the 30-day average. It is down at minus 0.62. Where was it a month ago? It was up at 17. So that would have been inactive phase, moving into the active phase now, but it's delayed, right? Because it's a 30-day average. So it's sort of like looking 15 days back. The 90-day average, this is your El Nino, La Nina indicator, still positive, 7.51, suggesting La Nina, weak La Nina. Where were we a month ago? 9.41. So not a big change there. Let's go look at the trend on a graph. So here we are, about as dead neutral as you can get. This was as of December 19th, so about a 2-day lag. But here was our previous inactive phase of the MJO. Here's our current active phase heading down. That active phase, I think, is all but over, so at some point this thing will bottom out and probably start rising again. To put things in perspective, so here was last year's La Nina, a very weak one. We're sort of in that ballpark. And here was a weak El Nino back here in 2023. So you can see the trend has been upward some and then kind of steady. So no big swing one way or the other. And one last thing I wanted to look at was here we go to get that up this way. The current on the equator. If you have strong trades on the equator, the current pretty much starts ripping along with it. And you can see that is the case and has been the case. But last time we did this little exercise, you see there's actually west anomalies, or at least a dead neutral current the whole way to, well, even I'd say put it here, which you can't see it, but that's the date line's right there. That's the date line. So whatever was happening in the West Pacific before, it was at 170. Where's that? About right here. Or 165, somewhere in here was the dividing line. Now the dividing line has moved another good bit to the east, suggesting even though we have these swings in the MJO, the overall macro level trend is for a dying trade wind pattern in the west. That is, again, a very good sign, and something the CFS model had been forecast like months and months ago. It appears to be playing out. So what does the future hold? The sea surface temperature forecast for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. from the CFS version 2 model. All right, so where are we? We're in mid-December, somewhere right about here. Now, this is interesting. According to the model, we were supposed to, from this moment forward, temperatures were supposed to start heading up. And then all of a sudden, like a day or two ago, I noticed this continuation of temperatures at like minus 0.65 of a degrees to hold into the early part of January. But by mid-January, then it starts trending upwards and significantly after that. Now, that all looks exciting. I'm not taking that to the bank at all. My biggest hope is that we just get to here. That's going to be theoretically March. These lines are in the middle of the month, as one of our viewers educated me, which I appreciate very much. Don't want to be spitting out bad info here. But anyway, by March, mid-March, we should be fully neutral, and that's a major change considering how much cool water is in the Pacific. But the start of the trend, I think, is happening now, or give it a week or two, and then when we start to see the ocean responding, then that's a clear sign. Again, the fading of the trades in the West Pacific, the demise of the inactive phase of the MJO, the last inactive phase maybe that's happening right now, and then theoretically the building of westerly anomalies with a little bit more aerial coverage over the West Pacific. That's what would set up this increasing temperature pattern there. So for right now, swell pattern, not so great for the Pacific. Yeah, a little bit of activity off of California, but that activity, gale low, really is going to dump like a lot of precip into California. We'll take it, whether it be liquid or frozen, though it looks like the frozen precipitation forecast is pretty good once these snow levels start falling. And all that takes is the jet sort of moving a little bit onshore into California. And then we'll see good snow at both Mammoth and all the Tahoe resorts. And theoretically, we should be in business. And finally, I'm sure the Tahoe ski resorts, all of them for that matter, are dying for anything. So bring it on, cold air. We need it. I hope it happens. But even if it doesn't, the water and filling up the reservoirs, all that would be very good. That pattern has already started in the San Francisco Bay Area. Looking further out, the models suggest the current inactive phase of the MJO, which is causing the massive split in the Jetstream, which is preventing the swell machine from doing anything, should be over 2 weeks or so, something like that, or starting to at least significantly change 2 weeks from now. And when that happens, the swell pattern should start improving. So this is not, a whole winter of doom. At least we're not hoping that. The thoughts are we should be back in at least some modest surf pattern as we get into the month of January. Looking long term, all this theoretically is supposed to be just a bad dream, and as we get into March and April, we should be looking at a much better place. And as we get into the fall of next year, yes, I'm talking a year plus out from now, we should be in a way different place than we are today. So, yes, short-term pain for long-term gains, I guess, is the motto. All right, that's our video for this week. First off, I want to say Merry Christmas to everyone and Happy New Year. Be safe, hold your family dear, and enjoy the time off. I'm still planning on doing a video a week from now, unless something changes. And if it does change, it might just be off by a day or two, but I'm still planning on doing it. There isn't any surf to be chasing, and the snow, not with all the crowds up at Tahoe, so I might have to wait a little bit after that. But many thanks to you all for your support for Stormsurf over the past year. I do really appreciate it. And Merry Christmas to you and your family. We'll do this video again next week, same time, same channel. Take care.